Well, Governor Adeleke's defection is he's a victim of circumstance which is vicarious. Vicarious because every problem is human caused and therefore should also have human solution. And at the level of the leadership which he belonged to at the party ought to have acted decisively. You see, the challenge is immediately we begin to feed the monster without knowing that we'll end up in the belly of the monster. After a while, we become victims. So if we feed animals to the monster, we feed others to the monster, and we think that time would solve problems. Time allows human beings to solve problems. It doesn't on its own solve problems. So it's vicarious in the sense that action by leadership, strong action by leadership, ought to have been taken from 2023. Immediately the decline started. But there were negotiations. I mean, you also cannot fully blame them because sometimes you think that with negotiations, when passions are calm, that people could reconsider their position. But unfortunately, it didn't until the convention took the decision it did in Ibadan. So that's the nature of what has happened. He's become a victim of circumstances arising from vicarious liabilities, which he cannot completely extricate himself from.
So you sort of give excuses for Governor Adeleke of Osun State, but for Governor Fubara of Rivers State, no excuse at all. What is really different? Because he could well say, in fact, if there's anybody that has been a victim of circumstance, it is me. So what exactly is at play here? Why do you give excuse for one and the other you slam?
No, we are not giving excuses. We are saying that both are circumstantial, and even the victims of the circumstances themselves had a role to play in the conflicts that eventually engulfed and they became victims from. So we are not making excuses. But in the case of Fubara, you do know that Fubara voluntarily became a candidate of the party. And you do know that people have said, the people who brought him have always said that, oh, there were agreements. We're talking about agreements. Agreement should be agreement. Till today, he hasn't said what the agreement was. But his political party stood by him. And the point of our anger is really when he mentioned that he wasn't secure in the platform. We all have great sympathies for Fubara. Even as a person before becoming a publicity secretary, I had sympathies for him. A calm, gentle person who is pushed to the wall, who has no other direction to move than in the opposite direction. But to attempt to lay blames, other than to lay blames, where blames ought to be. Because if you backtrack and begin to look at the origin of the crisis, you know that the origin of the crisis is between two people. So one person is talking, the other is not talking. You remember that people rose up at the beginning of this crisis and began to speak for him. And after a while, he came out and said, no, don't worry. It's a father-son matter. And after a while, a state of emergency was declared. People started, advocating, saying, and he went silent. And you see, when I spoke to some governors, especially Governor Bala, and said, what happened? Governor Bala said, look, we were ready and we have deployed at some points, but the governor would either remain incommunicado or we'll say, don't worry, we would handle it. And you see, so voluntary non-fit injury, you cannot do harm to a consenting person. So when you look at this circumstance, even as journalists, you seated there, you would definitely agree that we have been confused about the approach which he wants. And you cannot fight more than the person who is hurt. You cannot cry more than the bereaved. So while he has our sympathies, but the attempt to shift blame is what we are very angry with. And that is what we shouldn't do. Every time there is a problem and we need to find a solution, there's no need shifting the blame. When you get into a voluntary agreement, today he has not said what agreement he got into. He has not really told Rivers people or us on camera or confided in anyone what the real issues are. So people have just jumped into this battle supporting him because they feel that no one should be oppressed to the point where a governor becomes a sitting duck. But how has he even appreciated the people who fought with and for him? When he returned from the state of emergency, what was his speech? How encouraging was that speech for the people who fought for him? During the preparations for convention, I remember a journalist asked Governor Bala about what the party was doing. Governor Bala clearly said, look, we need to allow him, that he's been through a lot, that they've been speaking. So you can't just throw other people under the bus because of your actions and inactions. So if you read the statement that we released, while we sympathize with him and we know that this is a situation where Stockholm syndrome has happened, where a captive has fallen in love with the captor and he's unable to differentiate between where the real problem lies. But we frown against that conscious amnesia where he picks and chooses where the blame should be. He knows where the origin of his problem is. He knows where the continuity of his problem is. When he went to court about the issue of defection, he knows what the truth about it is, and he should be able to say that. So again, that deflection by him begins to beg the question whether he is placing the blame where it should rightly be.